Here we are once again with another Robot Wars Series 2 review. We're on to Heat H now, and it's got some interesting robots. Let's get into it. Craig's latest intro has him complaining about his neighbours and how loud they are, but says that it could be so much worse, as if you've got quiet neighbours, they could be out tinkering on robots. Actually, I think I would prefer that, quite frankly. But imagine living next to the Minotaur team. It would be like, oh, sorry about that. It would be like, oh, sorry about the background noise, everyone. That's just the Death Hub again. Anyway, let's look at today's robots. First up is Sting, a 79.3 kilogram robot with a ramming spike and a scorpion tail, which they explained is actually inspired by their own cat's tail. Okay. I don't have much to say, as the robot itself isn't crazy interesting to me. Then we have Cassius, an early Robot Wars legend. Cassius is a front hinge flipper from Rex Garrett, who competed in the first series with Cyclops. This is a design which, aside from how thin the flipper panel is so forward-thinking that many flipper designs still hold a great many similarities to Cassius to this very day. It also comes in weighing in at 79.3 kilograms. Groundhog, probably one of the more visually unique robots of the entire series. The drive on this is rather unique. Jonathan Pierce points out that the legs can move up and down, which reminds me of what Apex is actually trying nowadays in BattleBots' Proving Ground. But also, the rear wheels are Omni wheels. It's the same type of wheels that we see on the likes of the latest version of Apex, Shatter, Ominous, Glitch. It's kind of crazy to see a wheel type that is only more recently being adopted, being seen this early on. So this is all very impressive on a technical level, which made more sense when I saw the builders, being the team that would go on to create Firestorm, which is quite possibly the most famous front hinge flipper of the time, with Alex Mordew still competing nowadays with his Beetleweight sore loser. Anyway, Groundhog also has a horizontal disc at the front and weighs in at 79.3 kilograms? Did they give up weighing these robots, or did they have a laugh when arranging these heats? Because we have had 3 robots weighing apparently the exact same. Anyway, Loco is a spring-powered ram robot, which apparently caused the team no end of bother, taking 6 months to build. The shape of the robot is quite round, which immediately made me think that they were going for the similar effect that robots like Behemoth have with those little attachments, allowing them to roll over if they get flipped. But given how early this series is, I couldn't say for certain if that was their actual intention. It could be just as likely they just thought the shape was neat. Still, the robot breaks the pattern of the weight, weighing in at just 73 kilograms. Rampage is certainly interesting, with 2 forks, an incredibly large yet steep wedge made of stainless steel, 2 gigantic wheels, and a rear disc on the back. Rampage definitely felt like it had the right idea of how to make a semi-competitive robot in Series 2, but the execution did have my eyebrows raised. Still, weighing in at 82.7 kilograms, they definitely had the weight to potentially back themselves up. Finally was Wizard, and I know I've called some of the other robots in this heat unique, and I do stand by that, but this robot, at first I genuinely wasn't sure what I was looking at. It has a drill, as well as 2 chains, which I would later find out were bike chains, not even like chains. These are like, well, I mean, I guess bike chains are kind of effective, but not against robots. So I knew that this was not going to be the most powerful robot of all time, especially as the flails obviously only work if it's spinning on the spot, and with a top speed of 15 miles per hour, yeah, I don't know what they were going to go for here. Even better was later in the episode, they ended up taking the hat off to show a speaker underneath, as they mentioned that would give it its wizard voice, and then and then we got to hear the wizard go, "Kill!" Like, I don't remember Merlin saying that. Maybe after a night of drinking wizard ale, but oh my god, this robot was the gift that kept on giving. As always, the Gauntlet is the first round, and on top of the Sentinel's second appearance, there is now the Sphere. Now, why isn't that on the House Robot page? said sarcastically. I'm not meant to read that part. Cassius started us off and pushed down the Sentinel path and easily sped past them and to the finish line in what has to be one of the fastest gauntlet runs yet. Dead Metal caught them, but it had as much bearing as if a goalie was stood at the very back of the net. Point being, Cassius was safe for the next round in an impressive run while the house robots were all asleep at the wheel. Loco came out next and also tried the Sentinel's path, and while the Sentinel was again very lethargic, it didn't matter as Dead Metal was now fully awake and grabbed this slow-moving locomotive, sending them into the pit. With a distance of 10.4 meters, it was almost assuredly safe and would very likely ensure them going to the next round, but their performance definitely left much to be desired. They were really quite slow. Groundhog was up next, who took the center path, but the robot was skidding along like it was a trolley. The Omni wheels really were not as effective as we would see in later designs, as they ended up getting stuck at the first ramp. They mentioned that the team were trying to patent the wheels, so I then had to look it up. It turns out they were slightly late, as Omni wheels were first patented back in 1919, with a variant being patented in 1972. Still, they were certainly right about it being a notable wheel of the future, even if it wasn't really getting showcased all that well in this episode. Circular Lot picks up Groundhog and actually ends up tipping itself over in probably the biggest moment of this gauntlet run. According to the wiki, Circular Lot has never actually been flipped over, despite how desperately Team Apollo tried to change that, so moments like these where Killer Lot tips itself are the closest we ever get to that. Anyway, despite all the forward-thinking tech and bringing down Killer Lot, 4.4 meters meant that things were looking dangerous for Groundhog. Sting comes out down the path with the Sentinel, but they struggle to even get to the Sentinel as they crash into one of the spiky blocks. They then easily make it past the Sentinel, but right into the clutches of Dead Metal, who takes several small cuts into Sting's shell. And as Sting starts pushing back, in what would ultimately cut Sting's run, the Sentinel finally came into play, pushing them towards the pit, allowing Dead Metal to make the last push to finish their run. With 10.5 meters though, they would certainly be safe. For a moment, it did look like it was having a bit of luck pushing Dead Metal, but the Sentinel absolutely caught them off guard there, so not a crazy run, but a little bit more impressive than the likes of Loco and Groundhog for sure. Rampage came out and immediately got thrown off course by one of the rising spikes, which seemed to kill half of the drive as they began spinning on the spot. Dead Metal and Killer Lot drove over to pick them apart and ended up pushing them even further back. The attacks also caused Rampage to split apart with some gnarly damage. Part of the top began to get frayed, there was a hole at one part, the disc was fractured. Rampage was in tatters by the end. It was an abysmal run for the team due to these unfortunate circumstances, giving them the terrifying run of just 3 meters. Wizard was the last one up, and I was dying laughing from the Wizard voice reveal. And it only got worse as the robot went down the Sentinel path and drove right into the pit. It only needed a little nudge from Dead Metal as it was just dangling there. It was so comedically bad, but I loved it for that. It was so funny watching Wizard just drive right in. And with 5.4 meters, they would be moving on anyway, which actually did make me happy. I wanted to see more of what Wizard would do. Shockingly, when I was looking at the runtime, the gauntlet actually took up a large chunk of the actual episode. Like, it always does, but I was more than halfway done with the episode, I'm pretty sure, by the time the gauntlet was done. And, trust me, it's going to make sense in a moment. So, the next round was soccer. The robots all have to score a goal. The goalie was Sergeant Bash, and Matilda was on the fence. Honestly, not a bad set of robots to have to deal with, as if Dead Metal had been goalie, I would have just given up right there. Once again, the ball isn't perfectly round, meaning that you can't just kick it and then let it roll in. You have to kind of force it in. And the first robot to score was actually Loco, as even though Cassius was extremely aggressive, Loco was able to get in amongst the chaos and push the ball into the goal. meaning that they would be going on to the fight rounds. Once that was done, Cassius quickly got a hold of the ball, and because their drive was so much stronger than everyone else, they were easily able to bully the ball away and keep a hold of it. The likes of Matilda tried to get involved, but it really didn't matter. Now, Cassius did have some plastic attachments that were meant to help with shepherding the ball, but the wedge seemed to be too high up to get to truly take advantage of it. But in the end, it really didn't matter, as after a little bit of difficulty as they pushed the ball away from the goal for a bit, they soon ended up scoring and moving on to the fight rounds. This is when the soccer match though completely falls apart. The round starts and Wizard was nearly degloved by Matilda, but it wasn't as bad as Sting, who just apparently died in its sleep between rounds. Groundhog meanwhile was spinning on the spot as its drive seemed to half die, so Sergeant Bash and Matilda started making their own fun. Sergeant Bash set the ball on fire, which actually burnt surprisingly well. And Matilda just kept bullying the different robots, tipping Groundhog over to end the round. Now, as Sting broke down, they determined that Sting would be eliminated and that Wizard and Groundhog would move on to the fight rounds by default, which is definitely a damp squib way of moving, as this just resulted in a technicality win, but it was such a catastrophic way for things to fall apart that I again found it amusing to watch. Like, it's not good. I do want to stress that, but sometimes sometimes watching things go catastrophically wrong can be entertaining in its own right, and this was certainly that. Anyway, we're on to the fight rounds now, and this is when it really hit me how, let's be honest, there was only ever going to be one robot to win these fights, based on the 4 remaining robots. First up we had Loco versus Groundhog. Loco comes out first in this one, and Groundhog, as impressive as this drive system is, has nothing really to be able to fight with, as they drive around blindly, being pushed into the PPZ, where Shunt takes a few swings, before Dead Metal brings the saw in, and then finally, Matilda lifts them up and pushes them into the pit, ending their run there. Which meant that this wasn't much of a fight, to be honest, but I also don't know what I was expecting from these robots. I mean, what were you expecting seeing a fight between Loco versus Groundhog? Because I can tell you this is probably about what I could have reasonably expected if I was to really think about it. Not a great fight, but I doubt it could have been much better. Then we had Cassius versus Wizard, my 2 favourite robots of the heat. Now, this couldn't be more one-sided if it tried. Cassius rushed past Wizard. Apparently because Rex was having some trouble driving the robot, then passed them again into Dead Metal, and trying to turn a bad thing into a good thing, try tipping Dead Metal over. Then Wizard is pushed into the PPZ, but the house robots are definitely slightly distracted, as Cassius is determined to fight everyone, like this is Dynasty Warriors or something. Still, they eventually realise Wizard is in the PPZ, but the robot is evidently already dead by this point, so eventually it's all mainly eyes on Cassius, who tries flipping Bash over but just can't get the wedge under enough. The arena is also in a bit of a state by the time the fight is done. One of the little railings that they had around the side was completely broken off the side. Still, the fight ends, and even though it was incredibly one-sided, Cassius kept the fight rather entertaining with how cavalier it was about fighting everything. Still, we were onto the main event, and I was just hoping for a miracle to give us something a little bit more legitimately entertaining and not just funny, as we had Cassius versus Loco. The 2 robots ram into each other, and quickly Cassius flips Loco over before turning his attention to Dead Metal, nearly flipping it over. The other house robots descend, with Matilda repeatedly lifting Cassius and firing her sparks at Cassius? I'm not sure what that does. I think it's just purely a visual thing. Still, Rex manages to flip Matilda over on this new encounter. Cassius is then shoved into the pit by Shunt, ending the fight. Thankfully for Cassius, Loco was considered out of action long before then, so Cassius wins the heat and very well deserved. Like, let me be honest, even if we had all of the robots in this heat battling, it was still so obvious which robot was going to come out on top. Like, one of these robots has a design that's so forward-thinking that there are robots nowadays that have designs that are of a very similar shape to Cassius. Flippers are obviously still very common nowadays, and there's still a lot of wedge flippers that have similar shapes to Cassius. It was so obvious which robot was going to come out on top here, and Cassius, as crazy as it was so much fun to watch, and essentially carried this heat. Which, this heat will not be for everyone. Groundhog has some impressive tech that nowadays is a lot more common in robot combat. Loco was simple, but not too shabby a design. I'm going to be honest, like, sure, it's not the most competitive, but I actually think it was better than I reasonably but it was definitely better than I had expected going in. And Wizard was bad, but amazing in its own funny way. It's a very entertaining robot in its own right, in my opinion. But the heat overall just wasn't all that good. If what I said sounds like it enough to you, then feel free to check it out on Mech Plus. You might get some mileage out of it like I did, but I feel like for most people, this one isn't too hard to skip, despite the legendary robot that is in it. Anyway, despite all that, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please be sure to leave a like on this video to show your support. Comment down below what you thought of this heat if you watched it. Share this video around with your friends because it would be great to get more eyes on the channel. And subscribe and hit that notification bell yourself if you haven't already to be notified of future videos on the channel. Also, there's the join button, which if you hit that for just £1 a month, you can get access to custom emotes as well as members-only videos. I'm posting a bunch of members-only videos right now, so be sure to check them out if you want. No pressure, of course, but donations and memberships are probably the biggest ways that you can support the channel. Anyway, I hope to see you all next time. Bye, guys!